The night Ronan Ashgrove rejected her, the moon was full and bright, as if the sky itself wanted to witness the moment clearly. Elira Voss stood in the center of the pack hall, her hands trembling at her sides, while 300 wolves watched their alpha king turn away from the one the goddess had chosen for him. "I reject this bond," Ronan said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "Elira Voss is not fit to stand beside a king." She did not cry. She would not give him that. She simply nodded once, turned, and walked out of the hall with her spine straight and her chin high, even though inside her chest something had cracked in half. That was 3 years ago. Elira had built a new life since then, far from Blackthorn territory, in a small village called Hollow Creek, nestled between two mountains. She was a healer there, known for her steady hands and her quiet way of making people feel safe. No one in Hollow Creek knew she had once been a queen in waiting. No one knew she carried a mate bond that had been broken in front of an entire kingdom. She liked it that way. Elira had told herself, over and over, that she was healed. That the ache in her chest, whenever she caught the scent of pine and rain, the scent that had once meant home to her wolf, was simply a memory and nothing more. She told herself this so often that some days she almost believed it. Then, on a cold morning in early autumn, 3 years of careful peace shattered. A convoy of wounded wolves stumbled into Hollow Creek, blood soaking through torn clothing, exhaustion carved into their faces. A border skirmish, they said. Blackthorn's forces had been ambushed near the eastern ridge, and the nearest safe haven with a healer was Hollow Creek. Elira did not ask questions. She never did. She simply rolled up her sleeves and got to work, moving from one wounded body to the next, pressing herbs into wounds, murmuring words of comfort, doing what she had always done. She was kneeling beside a young wolf with a gash across his ribs when she felt it. A pull in her chest, sudden and sharp, like a string drawn taut after years of slack. She looked up. Ronan Ashgrove stood in the doorway of her healing house, blood on his shirt, his eyes fixed on her, as though she were the only solid thing in a world that had gone soft and uncertain. Neither of them spoke. The room around them seemed to hold its breath. "You're bleeding," Elira finally said, because it was easier than saying anything else. "It's not mine," Ronan replied. "I'm fine." She nodded and returned her attention to the young wolf's wound, forcing her hands to stay steady, even though her heart was pounding hard enough that she was certain he could hear it. Ronan did not leave. He stayed in the doorway, watching her work, watching the woman he had once cast aside move through the room with quiet authority, healing his people with a gentleness he did not deserve to witness. When the last of the wounded had been treated, when the others had gone to rest, Ronan finally stepped further into the room. "Elira." "Don't," she said, not looking at him. "Whatever you're about to say, don't. I have to." She turned to face him then, and for the first time in 3 years, she let herself really look at him. He looked older, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the battle. There were lines near his eyes that had not been there before. He looked like a man who had carried something heavy for a very long time. "I was wrong," he said. "Rejecting you was the worst decision I have ever made. I told myself it was for the good of the pack, for the alliance with the southern territories, but the truth is, I was afraid. I was young and foolish, and afraid of what it meant to belong to someone so completely. I have regretted it every single day since." Elira felt something twist inside her, old pain rising up to meet new words. She had imagined this moment more times than she cared to admit, lying awake in the quiet of Hollow Creek, wondering what she would say if he ever stood in front of her again and asked for forgiveness. Now that the moment had arrived, she found her answer was simple. "No." Ronan blinked. "No? No, I won't forgive you. Not because I want to punish you, Ronan, but because some wounds don't close just because the one who made them finally feels sorry." Her voice was steady, though her hands were not. "You had 300 witnesses when you tore my heart out. You don't get to fix it with an apology whispered in an empty room. Elira, please, the bond is still there. I feel it. I know you feel it too." Feeling it and wanting it are not the same thing. She stepped back from him, putting distance between them, as though it could protect her. "I built a life without you. A good life. I am not going to burn it down because you finally learned to say sorry. Ronan's jaw tightened, grief and frustration warring in his expression. So that's it? 3 years of a bond ignored, and you won't even try? I tried, Ronan. I tried for years to be enough for you, back when we were only just discovering the bond. You were the one who decided I wasn't. She shook her head. I'm done trying to be chosen by someone who already made his choice once. She walked away from him then, out into the cold morning air, leaving him standing alone among the empty cots and the scent of healing herbs. That night, both of them dreamed the same dream. Illyra found herself standing in a forest clearing bathed in silver light, though no moon hung visible in the sky above her. The air smelled of night flowers and something older, something that felt like memory itself. She was not afraid, though she knew immediately that this was no ordinary dream. A figure emerged from the trees, tall and draped in light, that seemed to move like water. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, but beneath the gentleness was something vast and unshakable, like the tide beneath a calm sea. Illyra Voss, the moon goddess said, daughter of healers, you have carried your wound with great dignity. Illyra sank to her knees without meaning to, some instinct older than thought, pulling her down before the presence in front of her. My lady. Do you know why I have come to you tonight? No, my lady. The goddess's eyes, silver and depthless, held something that looked almost like sorrow. A bond is not a small thing, child. It is a thread I weave between two souls, meant to be honored, not broken, and left to fray. When Ronan Ashgrove rejected you before his pack, he did more than wound your heart. He tore a thread that was never meant to be severed, and left it hanging, unresolved, for 3 long years. Illyra's breath caught. I didn't ask for any of this. I know, the goddess said, and there was real gentleness in it. You did not choose to be hurt, but today, when he offered you the chance to mend what was broken, and you refused him, you chose to leave the thread torn rather than let it heal. A bond that is rejected once may still be saved. A bond that is offered healing and refused a second time cannot. Somewhere else, in a dream of his own, Ronan stood in the same silver clearing, hearing the same words, understanding with dawning horror what was coming. What are you saying? Illyra whispered. I am saying that the thread between you is beyond mending now, the goddess said. And because a broken, unresolved bond threatens the balance of all bonds I have woven, I cannot simply let it fade quietly. There must be a resolution. So here is mine. The clearing seemed to grow colder, though no wind stirred the leaves. Neither of you will ever bond with another, not through fate, not through choice, not through any magic I have given the wolves who serve the moon. Ronan Ashgrove will rule Blackthorn without an heir born of true mate magic, carrying the weight of a broken thread for the rest of his days. And you, Illyra Voss, healer of others, will live free of love's deepest pull, forever able to care for every soul who comes to you, but never again able to belong to one the way this bond intended. Illyra felt tears rise, though she did not fully understand why. That's not a punishment, my lady. That's a mercy. I don't want the bond back. The goddess's expression softened, almost pitying. You misunderstand, child. The cruelty is not in losing him. The cruelty is that you will always remember what it felt like to almost have it. You will heal others' wounds for the rest of your long life, and you will never fully understand why your own does not close. Ronan will sit upon his throne, surrounded by loyalty and duty, and he will never know the fullness of what a true bond could have given him. You will both be tethered to the edge of something whole, forever able to see it, never able to step inside it again. The clearing began to dissolve into silver mist. The goddess's final words followed them both out of the dream, echoing long after they woke. This is what happens when a broken bond is offered mending and turned away. Not death, not exile, only the quiet, endless ache of almost. Illyra woke, gasping in her small bed in Hollow Creek, her heart pounding, the dream already fading at the edges the way dreams do, though the words remained sharp and clear, carved into her memory. Miles away, in a tent among his recovering warriors, Ronan woke the same way, staring up at the canvas ceiling, understanding for the first time the true weight of what he had thrown away 3 years earlier. He did not go back to Hollow Creek to argue with her. There was nothing left to argue. The goddess's judgment was not a door that could be forced back open through pleading. He returned to Blackthorn instead, carrying his grief the way he had once carried his pride, silently and without complaint, because a king does not have the luxury of falling apart in front of his people. Illyra stayed in Hollow Creek. She continued to heal the sick and the wounded who came to her door, continued to live her quiet life among people who did not know what she had lost, or what she had refused to have again. Some nights, she still caught the faint scent of pine and rain on the wind, and her chest still ached in that old familiar way, though now she understood the ache would never fully fade, and never fully return either. She was caught, exactly as the goddess had promised, at the edge of something she could see but never touch again. Years passed. Ronan ruled Blackthorn well, in the end, wiser and gentler than the young king who had once stood in a crowded hall and cast aside the person the moon had chosen for him. He never took another mate, not because he tried and failed, but because the bond simply never came, no matter how many years passed. His pack respected him. Some even loved him. But there was always a quiet space beside his throne that everyone noticed and no one spoke of. Illyra too grew older, with the slow grace of someone who had made peace with an unhealed wound. She trained other healers, passed down what she knew, and found small joys in ordinary days. She never married, she never bonded. She never fully understood why, even surrounded by kindness and purpose, something in her would always feel like a door left slightly open to a room she was never allowed to enter. Once, many years later, at a gathering between territories meant to renew old alliances, their paths crossed again. Ronan, silver now threading through his dark hair, stood across a crowded hall from Illyra, whose own hair had softened with time, but whose eyes still held that same quiet steadiness he remembered. They did not approach each other. They did not need to. Across the distance, their eyes met, and for one long moment, everyone else in the hall seemed to fade away, the way it had the very first time they had ever seen one another, back when the bond between them had still been whole and full of promise. Neither of them smiled. Neither of them looked away. They simply stood there, bound by a thread that would never fully break and would never fully heal. Two souls forever caught at the edge of a love they had both, in their own ways, refused to save in time. And somewhere above them, unseen, the moon continued its slow path across the sky, patient and eternal, keeping its promise the way it always did,